You ever cram for a big exam, feel totally confident, and then just a week later, it's all gone? Like a complete blank slate? Yeah, it's an incredibly frustrating and super common experience. But what if I told you that forgetting wasn't some kind of failure, but actually a design feature of our brains that we could learn to work with? In this explainer, we're going to demystify the science of memory and give you a real toolkit to make what you learn actually stick, for good. Let's get into it.
So it really all starts with this question. Why does our brain, this, amazing supercomputer, seem almost designed to forget things? Well, it turns out this isn't a personal flaw, not at all. It's just a feature of how we're wired, and understanding that feature is the very first step to working around it.
You see, the core of the problem is that our brain has two very different systems for memory. First up, you've got your working memory. Think of it like a tiny, cluttered workbench. It can only hold a few things at a time before stuff starts falling off. And then you have your long-term memory. This is like a massive, vast library with pretty much endless shelf space. The whole challenge? Moving information from that tiny workbench into the giant library, well, that's not an automatic process.
And this whole process of forgetting is surprisingly predictable. Way back in the 1880s, a psychologist named Hermann Ebbinghaus actually mapped it out, creating what we now call the forgetting curve. And it shows this steep, dramatic drop in what you can remember within just the first few hours and days. This is our brain's default setting.
So our goal becomes really clear. Effective learning isn't just about seeing new information. It's about intentionally building a bridge to move that knowledge from the temporary workbench into the permanent collection of our brain's library. The real question is, how do we build that bridge?
Well, that's where our toolkit comes in. We're going to look at 3 really powerful, science-backed techniques that actually work together to systematically beat that forgetting curve.
Okay, so here are our 3 core tools. First up is something called retrieval practice. This is the art of pulling information out of your brain. Then you've got spaced repetition, which is all about when you do that pulling. And finally, there's interleaving, which focuses on how you mix up your practice. Let's dig into that first one, retrieval.
This quote right here, it completely flips the common idea of studying on its head. We usually think learning is about passively absorbing information, right? Like rereading our notes or highlighting a textbook. But the research is crystal clear. The most powerful learning happens when you force your brain to actively retrieve information. The act of remembering is what actually strengthens the memory itself.
And this is super easy to do. You can try a brain dump. After a lesson, just grab a blank sheet of paper and write down everything you can possibly recall. Or you can use low-stakes quizzing to test yourself without any of the stress. The 3-2-1 technique is also fantastic. Just force yourself to recall 3 key things you learned, 2 questions you still have, and 1 connection to something you already knew.
All right, let's move on to our second tool, because this is where it gets really interesting. Once you're actively retrieving information, the next critical piece of the puzzle is timing. Getting that timing right makes all the difference.
And the impact of this is huge. I mean, look at this study of medical students. It found that the students who use spaced repetition software, which is designed to prompt you to review info right as you're about to forget it, they scored almost 13 percentage points higher on a massive exam. They didn't necessarily study more, they just studied smarter by timing their retrieval perfectly.
Our final tool, interleaving, is all about mixing things up. Usually we do what's called blocked practice, like doing 20 of the exact same type of math problem in a row. It feels really productive, right? But it's actually terrible for long-term learning. Interleaving, where you mix up a bunch of different problem types, feels way harder. But that struggle, that's the whole point. It forces your brain to learn how to choose the right strategy, not just robotically apply the same formula over and over.
So we've got retrieval, spacing, and interleaving. Each one is powerful on its own, for sure. But the real magic, the secret sauce, happens when you stop using them in isolation. So what happens when you combine them?
The results are, well, they're absolutely staggering. A study from the Journal of Educational Psychology compared different strategies against just restudying something. Just doing retrieval practice by itself was 250% better. But look at that bottom line. When students combined retrieval with another technique to create associations, their recall improved by 300 to 400%.
Let's just sit with that number for a second. A 300 to 400% improvement. That is the difference between forgetting something and truly, deeply mastering it. This isn't just a small tweak. It's a game-changing shift in learning efficiency, and it's all unlocked by combining these simple principles.
But what's so fascinating about all this is that while our ability to measure these effects is new, the techniques themselves, they're ancient. Long before we had brain scans and lab studies, people understood the core principles of memory, just intuitively.
The most famous of these is the method of loci, probably better known as the memory palace. Ancient Greek and Roman orators used this to memorize epic, hours-long speeches. It basically works by hacking our brain's incredible knack for spatial memory, linking abstract facts to real, concrete locations.
And you can build one right now. Seriously. First, just visualize a path you know incredibly well, like the walk from your front door to your bedroom. Second, take the things you need to remember and create these vivid, weird mental images of them and place them at specific spots along that path. Then, to remember them, all you have to do is take a mental stroll and see the items right where you left.
So, this isn't just about cool party tricks or memorizing your shopping list. These exact same principles are being used by expert teachers right now to completely transform how complex subjects are taught in the classroom.
Take history, for example. Instead of just memorizing a bunch of names and dates, teachers can create immersive stories. By getting emotions involved, they're basically signaling to the brain, hey, this information is important, it's worth saving. And that helps move it from the workbench to the library.
Or in science, teachers use a technique called dual coding. By showing information both with words and with pictures, like explaining the water cycle while also showing a diagram. They create two separate pathways in the brain to that exact same memory. You're basically doubling your chances of being able to find it later.
And in math, there's the famous Feynman technique. The whole goal is to explain a really complex idea in the simplest terms you can, like you're talking to a kid. The moment you get stuck or have to use jargon, boom, you've just found the exact edge of your own understanding. It's an incredibly powerful way of testing yourself.
This brings us to what might be the single most important takeaway of all. It's a fundamental shift in how we think about learning itself. Because all of these effective techniques, retrieval, spacing, interleaving, they all have one crucial thing in common. Compared to just rereading your notes, they feel hard.
Psychologists actually have a name for this: desirable difficulties. That struggle you feel when you're trying to recall something, that's not a sign you're failing. That is the feeling of learning happening in real time. That effort is what forges strong, durable connections in your brain. The ease of passively rereading is just an illusion. The struggle of active recall, that's real learning.
So I'll leave you with this final thought. We spend so much energy trying to avoid that frustration of trying to remember something. But what if that feeling of effort, that mental strain, isn't the obstacle to learning? What if it's the path itself? What if the struggle to remember is the very secret to never forget?